So the NBA is coming back. Granted, it's still 2 months away, so it's going to be a little bit of time. But we have an actual picture of how it's going to go. Basically, we're taking the teams that are currently in the playoffs, plus the Wizards in the East, and then the Blazers, Pelicans, Kings, Spurs, and Suns in the West. 22 teams total. Everybody plays 8 games from the starting point of where they are currently in the standings to determine the rest of the standings. It also gives everybody 8 games to get back into it before the playoffs. I guess that's a pretty good amount of time. And we go from there. And there's also a very interesting thing happening with the 8th seed, mainly in the West. We don't really care about how it happens in the East. Basically, if the 8th seed, when the 8 games are over, is at least 4 games ahead of the 9th seed, 8th seed is in, that's it. If it's lower than 4 games and it's a play-in tournament, Woj said it's single elimination for the 9th seed and double elimination for the 8th seed. I'm going to be honest, I'm a little confused with what that actually means. Does that mean the 8th and the 9th seed would play each other? And then if the 8th seed wins, it's over, but if the 9th seed wins twice, then they're in? I don't totally know. The Grizzlies have a 3.5 game lead on the 8th seed, so that does give them a nice cushion. Now, I do want to mention, before I start diving into teams and all that stuff, they're still going to have to do this whole thing correctly. They're still going to have to make sure that the testing is there and they keep cases hopefully to 0. And that is going to be a constant thing throughout this entire thing. Like, I could talk about whatever team you want for a few minutes, and if their star player, their second or third best guy tests positive, that just throws their entire thing out of whack. 8 games is definitely enough to determine some close playoff races. I mean, the Celtics are 3 games behind the Raptors, which that's a pretty good cushion for Toronto, but you never really know here. The Heat are 2.5 games behind the Celtics. The difference between Miami at 4 and Philadelphia at 6 is 2 games. So there's a lot of shaking up that could still go on in the Eastern Conference. And very similar things can be said for the West. I mean, the Nuggets are a game and a half behind the Clippers. And then they're also a game and a half ahead of the Jazz. And then Utah at 4 and Dallas at 7. It's a 4-game difference there. And Dallas could jump Houston, or they could potentially even jump OKC all the way up to like 5, or, you know, if Utah has a tough stretch because they don't have Boy on now, so they could drop to 4. Teams are going to have to be ready to bring it. Now, I don't know how you balance these 8 games. I don't know if it's simply you just take the teams' schedules as they already were. I don't think that would be possible if you're removing 8 teams from the equation, so I don't totally know how you balance it. I mean, we'll just have to see. I really don't know what the option is there. I mean, I guess you would have to try something where maybe each team plays like 2 of the best teams twice, 4 middle teams, and then 2 of the lower record teams. Like, I really don't know what you do, but I'm sure they've got a plan for that. I guess one thing to think about is, would it have been possible for them to do anything else? Like, is there any other option that could have worked here? I mean, I saw some random things about doing it like the World Cup, where you have put each team in a division and then you kind of have them play each other, and then that would allow them to advance to the next round. The thing with that is I feel like it would have been very easy to stack the deck against certain teams, especially if you were a team in the middle. So that, and also that would have been super confusing. I feel like this is pretty easy to understand for the most part. I mean, the thing that still has me a little hung up is the 8th seed thing, but I'll get over it. Like, it's probably not that bad once I see a couple more details on it. And then, of course, the other thing to think about is what teams are going to be ready to go and which ones are going to struggle out of this. I mean, it's tough to predict which players are going to come in shape or out of shape. I mean, at this point, what players would you really need to suspect? I mean, there was a thing about Jokic having lost some weight, I guess. Luka, Zion, Kyle Lowry, Joel Embiid. I feel like that's kind of it. I don't know. And then as far as the guys we don't have to worry about at all, I mean, LeBron, Giannis, Kawhi, PG, whoever else. The next thing to think about is, of course, injuries. I mean, Ben Simmons had a back thing that is apparently better now. Is Kawhi going to play all 8 games? I mean, Did he play 8 straight games at any point during the regular season? I mean, if you got a chronic knee issue, you would think that an impromptu few months off could be a good thing. I don't know. I mean, it's a fine balance, right? It's like going from playing all the time to just hard stop, not playing for months. Maybe that's not as good as the way it has been for Kawhi. Play a few games, sit a game, play a few more, sit a game. I don't know. I'm not qualified to answer that sort of thing. Let's see. Paul George was going through something. We would hope that he'll be ready to go now. We got to remember, this is still 2 months from happening. I mean, it's happening at the end of July, so it's not like it's happening next week. Although, even so, the Jazz are not going to have Boy on. That's certainly going to hurt him there. I guess other interesting things to think about, really, you just go down the teams. I mean, if I look at the Western Conference, teams that I think are a little more interesting within these 8 games. So for one, like I mentioned, Utah, I'll say them again. I mean, the Donovan Mitchell-Gobert thing, are they going to be totally fine? Conley, of course, has not been great this year. Boyan is now out for them, and that's going to be tough for them to really just kind of get the momentum going back in the right direction. But even so, because of all this time off and the short sample size of 8 games, it really does open up randomness in the sense of maybe some random role player just has a scorching 6-game streak from outside, and suddenly we'll just say, like, say Dallas. Let's say Dorian Finney-Smith just can't miss a 3 for 5 games. Dallas goes 5-0 in those games. Suddenly, they're the 4th seed. That type of thing could definitely happen. Other things in the West, I feel like OKC, they, maybe more than a lot of teams, could really feel the effects of this time off, because I think they were really coming together and they were playing awesome. I mean, they were 8-2 in their last 10 when the season ended, and it just seemed like they were really gearing up towards being a very difficult team to deal with, and I honestly wouldn't have been shocked if they could have pulled off just some playoff run, just through Chris Paul's mid-range shooting, and Steven Adams is tough as hell, and Schroeder with the starters was killing everybody, and Gallo can put up 25 any random night. It just seemed like a team you really didn't want to play. And I think a lot of that was because of their chemistry and whatever else. And now that the season just got zapped, are they going to be able to get back to that level of togetherness? Could be an easy thing, it could not. I mean, Houston, I'm sure they would have wanted a lot more time to have the small ball thing. I mean, it was very successful when they initially went to it, fell back down to earth a little bit. I feel like we really could have seen them get comfortable with it until the season ended. And I mean, is 8 games enough to get back to, okay, this is what we do? Covington, PJ, you guys have got to do a lot of stuff as our front court. I think that's going to be difficult. I feel like also just given the sometimes randomness of 3-point shooting and the fact that this is going to be a very different NBA in the sense of no crowd and everybody's in the same location, and there's probably just going to be a general feeling of uncomfortable for everybody, and that could sway 3-point shooting down a couple of percentages, which could be kind of a big deal, especially because I think everybody's just going to be a little rusty, you know what I mean? And so in that specific environment, I feel like physicality and offensive rebounding could be a little more valuable than it typically is, right? Bouncing back to the Eastern Conference, I do want to mention Victor Oladipo. I mean, Indiana's got an interesting thing to think about there. I mean, you have to imagine with this time off that Oladipo has, I mean, he's certainly got to be more recovered, but if he was already playing, then I feel like the only thing left for him to really do would have been just adjust back to playing NBA minutes, and then that was taken from him, of course. So is he going to have enough time to really get back in the groove of what the Pacers want to do? Because they got used to Brogdon being the main ball handler and TJ doing some stuff, and Sabonis was getting a lot of assists, and there's a chance that Oladipo just, like, he'll be there and maybe he'll have some big games here and there, but I just don't know if they're going to be ready to just give him the offense like that. Now, at the same time, if he's all the way back to Oladipo of a couple years ago, then you probably just still do it, but it could just be a tough adjustment for Indiana. We got to talk about the Sixers as well. I mean, it was as awkward of a season as ever for them. The offensive fit was weird. They were amazing at home. They were bad on the road. Depending on what night you watch them, sometimes they look great. Sometimes they look dysfunctional as hell. Some nights Embiid is the most dominant force in the league. Other nights he's putting up like 19 and 7. Sometimes Ben Simmons looks great. Other times he's just kind of standing around. We already didn't know what to make of the Sixers, and now I feel like we really don't know what to make of the Sixers. I mean, I'll tell you right now, as a Celtics fan, Philly is still the team I'm most scared of in the first round because of Embiid. Because if he brings it, and if he's the best player in a series, then there's a good chance Philly wins that series regardless of all the other stuff going on. I mean, if we look at, like, what players in the Eastern Conference are definitely better than Joel Embiid on Embiid's best night? It's Giannis, and probably just Giannis. Unless Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving just return out of nowhere. Speaking of the Celtics, is Tatum going to be ready to really get back to being the main guy on offense? Is Kemba going to be healthy? The Celtics, it seemed like they had one guy out every single game this year. So we'll see if they're ready to go. And I do want to make a video specifically on the 8th seed thing in the West, but just to talk about it right now. Memphis has a nice lead. 3.5 games on everybody, and 4 games, and then 6 games on Phoenix. So for the Spurs and the Suns, their best bet would probably be to get the 9th seed and then have some things go their way. I mean, in that whole mess of teams, I feel like Portland is probably the one to watch for the most, because if you give Damian Lillard 8 games, he may be able to go nuts enough to get Portland in there. But those are my short thoughts. I want to do another video on the 8th, 9th seed thing in the West, because I feel like it's interesting enough for its own video. But yeah, the NBA is back. Suddenly every single team becomes kind of under this microscope of, are you going to be ready to go? And it certainly gives me more content, because now I can start to think about that. It probably is still not going to cover 2 months of content, but, it'll help.